Welcome to Marauders Weekly on NBC North Dakota Sports. Marauders Weekly is your exclusive home to University of Mary Marauder athletics all season long. Football, basketball, volleyball, and more. You'll see it right here on Marauders Weekly.
Well, UMary football was back on the road this weekend, heading to Bemidji to face the 1-3 Beavers. Welcome to Marauders Weekly. I'm Marissa DiCandido, and as always, we are starting with football here today on the show. We have head coach Josh Kotelnicki, and today we have sophomore cornerback Jacob Parker. So, Jacob, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Looking very fresh in the bow tie, I must say. But, Coach, we're going to start with you. Bemidji coming off their first win last weekend over at Concordia St. Paul. What were the biggest things that you were looking at on film from that game to approach the Beavers this week?
Well, they were on a 3-4 defense, and that was going to cause a lot of adjustments for us up front in the run game and the passing game. So we're trying to simplify our pass protections, and we really were trying to, get the ball in the perimeter of the run game. I wouldn't say we did either one of those in the game very well, and we didn't want to have to throw the ball a lot. We ended up throwing 62 times and setting a school record, tying a school record. And so that was kind of the tale of what happened, and we got up to a poor start in front of a big homecoming crowd, and their crowd was into it from the very beginning. So I'm sure we'll get to see all that again in the highlights.
Yes, we will, and it was a very big homecoming crowd in Bemidji. But Jacob, the Beavers have a couple of targets that they go to on offense, a couple of receivers. So what did you guys focus on defensively in practice to prepare for that?
So defensively, we wanted to make sure that we were prepared for all the wide receiver sets that they had, because they had a couple different ones, and then we also put a big focus on the maintaining leverages and just making sure we understood their passing concepts.
Well, let's take a look at the first half highlights from the Marauders trip to Bemidji. Well, the first play of the day for the Beavers, it's Jordan Hine, quarterback, keeping it himself. He goes 38 yards up the middle to the Mary 18 before he's finally brought down. And on the very next play, it would be Tahi Nomain, goes through a huge hole to the house. A two-play possession that lasts 19 seconds. Beavers are up 6-0. Coach, what happened here in the beginning of the game?
Poor execution. Not the things that we had in practice all week. Just poor execution by the linebackers and secondary.
Well, the extra point was no good, but on the next Marauders possession, Caleb Buck throwing it up, and Evan Tompkins bobbles it a little bit, but ends up coming up with the interception, and that would start the Beavers' next scoring drive. That would end with Hine dropping back and finding Vince Stinkle for the 27-yard score, now 13-0 Beavers. Then PAT, this one is blocked for the Marauders, and that would be a strength for UMary all day on special teams. Jacob Parker there picking it up, tries to return it, but he's taken down. Still in the first quarter, Hine looking to Jordan Niskowiak, and that will be a 16-yard score. This time they go for the two-point conversion to make it 20-0. So Jacob, after the start defensively, what did the group talk about going into the second quarter?
Well, we knew we could play a lot better than that, so everyone just kind of buckled down and just realized that we need to play our game and not let them dictate what we're going to do. So we all just buckled down. We've been in a situation like this before, and we started playing our game.
Yep, and then offensively, Marauders get some things going there with a 51-yard score to Brennan Doan to make it 20-7, and that's when the Marauders defense would wake up. Preston Tesher ends the Beavers drive here by forcing an incomplete pass on 3rd and 6. And on the next Beavers drive, they hold them again on 3rd down. This time it's Landon Smith almost coming up with the interception, but not quite. And then more good things on defense. Beavers in the red zone, 3rd and goal. Seth Walton breaks up this one, also almost coming up with an interception. Bemidji would miss the field goal, so the Marauders keep them off the board. And then 1st and 15, Caleb Buck hits Zach Podol for a gain of 20 and a first down, but UMary couldn't get much going from there. Then the Beavers with a chance to get in the end zone one more time, but Jacob Parker puts a stop to that. Jacob, what did you see here on this play defensively?
Well, in the last series where they're close to the end zone, I noticed a lot of the same passing concepts. So I just, played back and sure enough saw the same thing coming, so I just played it like that.
Well, the Beavers would go for a field goal, and this one will end up getting blocked as well. Strong end to the half for UMary defensively and on special teams. But at halftime, the Beavers still have a 20-7 lead. So now, Coach, before the game, you talked about establishing the run. You just touched upon that a little bit before we got into those highlights. That didn't really end up happening in the first half. When did you decide to kind of abandon that concept of going with the run?
Well, when down 3 scores at the end of the first quarter, you don't have another choice. I mean, that's what you have to do. We were down 3 scores, and we were short of possession because at halftime we were going to have to kick off. So basically, from the second quarter on, we were in throw mode to catch up and get back in the game.
How did you see Caleb Buck kind of adjust to that in the first half?
Well, I was, the first half, obviously there's some, I don't want to say growing pains, but growing pains with Caleb as he continues to see different coverages and we run different routes. But, the thing I was really impressed with Caleb throughout the game is how, he got hit a fair amount. He was tough. He stayed in there the entire game. And so I was impressed by his resiliency throughout the game.
Yes, very tough coming from Caleb Buck. But Jacob, 2 huge red zone stops there at the end of the first half. What kind of momentum did that give you guys defensively heading into the second half?
I mean, it's just a big confidence boost because, when we're going out there and you're seeing your offense get stuffed, it's kind of, it hurts the confidence of the team. But when, we can go out there and just, get the stop, it just helps boost the team morale up. So, just keeping hope in the game that, that we can come back and get the win.
Absolutely. Well, the defense would continue its impressive play into the second half, and we'll take a look at those highlights when we come back on Marauders Weekly. Welcome back to Marauders Weekly. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the University of Mary football game at Bemidji this weekend, and we have head coach Josh Kotelnicki and cornerback Jacob Parker here with us today. So let's jump right into the second half highlights. At halftime, the score 20-7 Bemidji. First Bemidji drive of the second half, 2nd and 10 from the Mary 11. Jacob Parker comes up with another pass breakup there, and then the Beavers try and use the ground attack on 3rd and 10, but Brandon Payne takes down No Man after 1 yard. So it's 4th and 9. Beavers deciding to go for it, and this is a huge stop for the Marauders. Parker once again. Now, Jacob, this looked like pretty much the exact same play from the end of the first half. What did you see out there on that one?
Well, when they were in goal line, I saw the same 2 pass concepts, and so he was either running the post or he was running the fade. And once he gave me, I was watching his hips, and I saw he was going fade, so I just made sure I was there.
Huge stop there for the Marauders, and next time the Beavers get the ball, first play of the drive, looks like Landon Smith gets a hand in there, forcing that fumble, and that would be recovered by Anthony Eagleston at the Bemidji 49. Seems like a huge momentum swing for the Marauders, but they could not get anything going on offense from it. More solid play from the Marauders secondary, though. This time it's Daniel Whitaker on 2nd and 4, breaking up the long ball and keeping the Beavers out of the end zone, but Bemidji would finish the drive in the house. It's No Man taking it up the gut, 8 yards for the score, 27-7 now. First play of the next Marauders possession. Caleb Buck drops back, scrambling a little bit. He breaks a couple tackles, and he heads up the right side for a 9-yard gain. And as coach said, a lot of toughness from Buck in this game. Later in the drive, he would drop back and find Brennan Doan over the middle. A great leaping catch there for the Century product, but they wouldn't be able to get in the end zone on 4th and 10. It's fumbled, and the Beavers pick it up. So it's still 27-7 heading into the 4th quarter. 3rd and 7, Buck scrambling again, breaking another tackle. This time, though, he finds Zach Podol for the first down, but later in the quarter on 4th and 8, Gunnar Olszewski is going to pick off Buck on the sideline, and he takes it 54 yards to the end zone, 33-7. Mary would once again block the extra point. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but the Beavers would get on the board one more time at the end of the game. And so the final here from Bemidji is the Beavers 39-7 over the University of Mary. Let's take a look at some of the game stats from this one. Caleb Buck, 32 of 64, 299 yards for a touchdown and 2 interceptions. He also led the team with just 18 rushing yards, and as coach said in the beginning of the game, 64 passing attempts in a single game ties the school record. Brennan Doan had 6 receptions for 98 yards and a score, and Sam McAdams led the receiving corps with 7 receptions for 44 yards. Defensively, Preston Tesher led the way with 9 tackles and a pass breakup. Seth Walton had 7, including a tackle for loss and a breakup of his own that we saw in the highlights. Daniel Whitaker, 6 tackles and 2 breakups. Jacob Parker, 5 and 4 breakups. And Anthony Eagleston, he had 3 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a fumble recovery. And talked to him a little bit after the game just about what the defense needs to do to be able to play a strong 4 quarters from here on out.
Just have fight, I don't know, we kind of give up on ourselves. We need to have more heart, dig down deep, and actually use the energy to finish off more drives. Sometimes words may not be the best motivators for some, but even still, you gotta use them. You gotta uplift them. Whether it's just a high five, whether it's just to go up to them and say a few things. But I don't know. Most of the teammates have to feed off of each other more and feed off each other energy more.
Well, Coach, one of the things, looking at the stat sheet after the game, 1 of 7 for 4th down conversions, and in previous games you guys had been going with a play with Colton Farmer under center for 4th down conversions. Didn't see that at all in this one. What was kind of your approach on 4th down conversions in this game?
Well, we were off the reservation on 4th down because a lot of those were 4th and longs, you know what I mean, in the second half. So 4th and 1's kind of no-brainer most places in the field. You're going to go for that. But I don't think we had 1 4th and 1 in the game on Saturday. So they're all 4th and 2, 4th and 3, 4th and 7, 4th and 9, which is what you have to do when you're down multiple scores in the second half. So that scenario just never came up, I don't think, on Saturday.
Well, another thing, 11 penalties for 79 yards. Over the past year and a half, your team has been one of the least penalized teams in the conference. What happened here Saturday?
Well, I think both teams were penalized a fair amount.
Yeah.
You know, we're still the second least penalized team in the conference. That just happens sometimes. I certainly think the difference between an official seeing one thing one way and the next week seeing it a little different with the same scenario. I'm not concerned about our penalties. I'm not concerned that our kids are playing undisciplined. If I was, we'd address it, believe me. But I'd expect that to improve this week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, special teams was very successful, as we saw in the highlights. Jacob, what did you see on special teams in regards to, I think, Coach, you said 4 blocks overall, 3 extra points, and a field goal. So, Jacob, what did you see from the special teams perspective there?
Well, our interior D-line on the field goal block was just eating. They weren't letting anyone stop them. They were getting back there and causing pressure. The kicker was missing.
Well, Coach, also on offense, ran a little bit faster paced offense, especially in the second half here. Assuming that has something to do with being down a couple scores, but how did you see the offense kind of execute that, as it's something we haven't seen previously, that faster paced offense?
Well, I thought you saw us move the ball, and then we get down in the red zone and we get into a 4th down and long, and instead of punting, we'd have to go for it. So we moved the ball well, I'll say that, when we transitioned to our 2-minute offense, but the end result was still 7 points. So that's disappointing.
Well, what needs to change next week, looking at that kind of, obviously, when you have red zone chances, have to execute those, but what else needs to change offensively?
Well, it's that delicate balancing act between changing something and sticking with what you're doing and assuming the kids will continue to improve. Field goal block was a big story from yesterday. We didn't practice field goal block 1 time last week. You know what I mean? So we've done that every week the last 5 weeks, and sometimes those things just happen. What we just need to continue offensively to do is make sure that we're utilizing our players, both their physical and mental capabilities as best we can. And sometimes when you have a new quarterback situation, that's a feeling out process. But I think by this point we have a pretty good feel for what our players can do. And so, some of the things with the pass protection issues, we went into the game trying to avoid scenarios like our 2-minute drill when we're a 6-man protection versus a 3-4 front with guys coming from every direction. So, unfortunately, we were aware of that problem going into the game, and unfortunately, because of the situation in the game, we ended up having to deal with it anyway. So, I think our offensive staff had a good plan, but you throw the plan out the window when you're down 20-0 after 1 quarter.
Yep. Well, Jacob, next week is a big game for you guys. Going up against Minot State, they're coming to Bismarck. Battle of the Big Lake. It's a huge rivalry game. How important is a win in that game for your team next week?
I mean, it's huge because, morale's down. I mean, everyone's a little down. No one expected the season to go like this. So a win against a team that we hate, it would be great, because no one likes Minot. I mean, Minot's probably the biggest rivalry of the whole year. And if we can beat them, we're back in the race,
Absolutely. Well, Jacob, thanks so much for coming on the show, and Coach, as always, thank you as well. And before we take a break, let's take a look at some of the scores from around the Northern Sun on the gridiron this week. Number 1, Minnesota State topping Upper Iowa by 28. Winona over Concordia St. Paul 51-7. Sioux Falls, 7th ranked now, 59-10 over Wayne. Minnesota Duluth beating up on a Moorhead 47-14. Crookston fell to St. Cloud 62-14. A lot of blowouts this week in the Northern Sun. Augustana topping Southwest Minnesota State 48-23 for the Mustangs' first loss of the year. And the team that UMary needs to beat next week, the Beavers of Minot State, Northern State topping them 45-15. Well, coming up, it was a big weekend for UMary cross country at the Roy Griak last week, and we have head coach Dennis Newell and sophomore Lexi Zeiss here to tell us a little more about that. Welcome back to Marauders Weekly. Well, the University of Mary cross country team had one of its most successful outings in school history at the Roy Griak Invitational in Minneapolis last weekend. And now many Marauders fans were in Bismarck for homecoming that weekend. So to tell us a little more about the meet in Minneapolis, we have head coach Dennis Newell here and sophomore Lexi Zeiss. So guys, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, Lexi, we'll start with you. First of all, congratulations on winning the GRIAC, huge accomplishment. The first individual champion in UMary history. And I want to talk a little bit about training, because I know when we talked in the beginning of September, you had mentioned that you guys were doing a lot of hill training, headed to Spearfish for the first meet, and that was a little more hilly. And you said all that kind of helped you prepare for the GRIAC. How did it help you, and how did it help the team?
Felt a lot stronger. You could tell when you would watch some videos that we looked a lot stronger going up hills, and everybody said they felt really good going up them, and I could tell that all the training that we've been doing with the hills has really been paying off, and it's really good right now.
How did you feel going through the race? I mean, did you kind of going into it, I don't know if anyone ever expects to necessarily win, but what were you thinking going through that race?
Well, actually my goal going into the race was to take it out really easy, start out in the 30th area, but right when we started, within the first mile I was feeling really good, and I was like, if I just stay right here and then make the move after about 2 miles or so, that's pretty much felt pretty good during it.
Awesome. Well, Coach, so, going into this one, Lexi had mentioned when I talked to her before, just the goal this year is kind of she obviously wants to get back to nationals, but to get to the team to nationals. So what did you see from the team as a whole in this meet? Because obviously on the women's side, finishing 5th, great finish, and I believe it was the 5th year in a row that you guys have been in the top 5. So what did you see from the women's team?
A lot of fight, a lot of passion, a lot of team cohesion. Those are the 3 things that I think we can build on. Obviously, there's talent, there's ability. I think the work we're doing is adequate and appropriate. But again, I probably look more at the intangibles and more of what I call the subjective value out of a team. And they're coachable. That's a huge thing. So they listen, and I thought everybody did their job pretty well on Saturday at the GRIAC. And again, if we continue to do that and make the progress I think we can make. I saw some good things to build on.
Well, switching gears a little bit to the men's side, with their best finish in school history at 8th at the GRIAC, what did you see from them, specifically from Chris Jessup, who's back now after being injured last year, and he was the top finisher. So what did you see there?
Just overall, I think our men's team is more mature. Again, a lot of similarities to the women, very coachable, but I think they understand things. I can say undoubtedly this is the best men's team I've coached in my career here. And it maybe doesn't look like that every week on paper, but again, there's a lot of things that I value as a coach and I see every day that they possess. And again, they listen, they do their job well, and I think we're going to see some really good things here postseason coming into conference.
Well, speaking of going into conference, only one more meet before that, the Jimmy Invitational. So, Lexi, what are kind of the goals or motivations here of the team with just one meet before the conference championships?
Well, we have the Jimmy Invitational coming up this weekend on Friday, and the course has changed, so it's changed to a pretty flat course. So it's nice to get away from the hills a little bit. Going into it, it's still our same goal, finish strong as a team every single time. Especially having that race, we go back to the same course for conference, which is very nice because we've already ran on it once, and so we know what it is, what it's like. and it's going to be a little bit smaller since it's just NSIC teams, but it's still going to be a pretty big weekend that weekend.
Mm-hmm. And now, Coach, going into the conference championships, with, I believe, talking to you guys earlier in the year, you had said that you have one less meet this year before the conference championships, at least on the women's side. So how did that affect training at all going into this year, or how are you expecting that to affect the performance at the conference championships?
It changes things, but it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different.
Yep.
So yeah, we have one competition less, but we make up for that in training, and we always work our way backwards from the final goal, which is nationals and then regions and then conference, and then just kind of fill in the pieces from there. Everything's a puzzle, so. It doesn't really matter how many competitions, it just matters how many days I have with this team. Whether it's 107 or 111, and that's usually what it is. I have to take each one of those days and dissect it and say, what am I going to get out of this day? And so, short answer, it didn't really make a difference this year. Okay, well, with cross country, one of the biggest things every year, I think, is making sure everyone stays healthy, and that's a huge challenge. So how is the team looking this year in regards to that? I think we're relatively healthy. We live in a sport, much like some others, that you're going to be competing when you're banged up a little bit, and we deal with everything from anemia to stress fractures to sprained ankles to psychological issues. I mean, you name it, we deal with it from an injury standpoint. And I think it's up to us to be creative enough to find ways to stay healthy, and at the end of the day, we need to find a way to get the job done. And so again, that's more on me than them, but sometimes it's motivation, sometimes it's our healthcare professionals. There's a lot of different ways to do that.
Well, as Lexi said, this week, the University of Mary cross country team heading to the Jimmy Invitational on Friday, and after that, the Northern Sun Conference Championships later in the month. So Lexi and Coach Newell, thank you guys so much for coming on the show today. Welcome back to Marauders Weekly. Well, UMary women's soccer hasn't been at the MDU Resources Community Bowl since September 5th, but they were back this weekend for 2 conference home games, and one of the anchors for the Marauders this year is senior defender Jackie Smith. We have more with her in this week's Meet a Marauder.
Well, I like the U.S. Women's National Team, of course, so I don't know if that's considered, I mean, it would be considered pro, so yeah, the U.S. Women's National Team. I really like to draw. I don't think people really know that about me, but drawing, just sketching, anything like that, writing, I like writing a lot too. My dream job would be working for some sort of nonprofit organization, being some sort of liaison in the communications department, communications director for a hospital or something along those lines. That'd be perfect. Probably any gluten-free, lactose-free pasta dish is probably the best thing I could cook. I really don't like losing. Any aspect in life of losing, I don't like that failure. Probably when we go to Bemidji, I really enjoy going there because usually we have some really great team bonding. We get to stay in a cabin or anything like that. We have done that the past 2 years, but also any of our rival schools going to Minot, I mean, that's always really fun because the atmosphere is a lot different than what you would get at any other school. We have a lot of people that travel, and we have a lot of people, I mean, obviously both teams really want to win. We're close enough, we're travel buddies. Probably being involved in my team and being involved in the school. It's a small community, so it makes it really nice to be able to go to anybody and know their name and everything like that. So probably just being at the school and being a part of in a soccer team.
Well, as we mentioned, 2 games this weekend for UMary. The second was between Winona and the Marauders, and in this one, Warriors controlling the ball early. Nicole Sams tries to play through, but Bolton is offside, so the score stays at 0. Then it's Kelsey Foss trying to get some offense going with the free kick. She tips it off the field goal uprights out of play. Marauders get a chance off the free kick of their own. Emily Christensen puts her kick over the net. We stay tied at 0, and then it's Winona's Bolton causing problems for the Marauders again, making her way through the defense, but the ball is a step ahead of her, and it's gathered up by Mary. The final from this one, it went into double overtime, but the Warriors would eventually come out on top 1-0. And on Saturday, Mary fell to the Peacocks 2-0. In men's soccer this weekend, Mary lost 2 on the road, both by scores of 2-0, and volleyball also on the road this weekend, and they fell to #1 ranked Minnesota Duluth and St. Cloud, both 3-0. Well, we started the show with football, and we will end with it as well. There was a familiar face to the Marauders on the other side of the field Saturday in Bemidji, and that was Beavers offensive coordinator Craig Bagnell. Now, you might remember the name. The former UMary quarterback was promoted to running the offense after just 1 year of coaching with the Beavers. He was the graduate assistant wide receivers coach last year. Bagnell says it's been a challenge to move into a high-pressure role, but he's enjoyed learning more, and he also enjoys going up against his former team.
Bringing back the memories of what I had. I was there for 4.5 years. It was an amazing 4.5 years. I loved it there. So just a lot of memories that come back in your head when you get ready to play for them. And still, there's a few guys that are on the team that are still playing. That, like Pat Ryan was my roommate for 2 years when I was there. So it's unique and a lot of fun.
Well, Bagnell graduated as the Marauders' all-time leader in passing yards, touchdowns, and completions. Thank you so much for joining me today on Marauders Weekly. We will see you right here next week.
Thank you for watching Marauders Weekly.